So today I received a list of all the reasons President Joe Biden sucks from a political action committee called Advancing American Freedom. Advancing American Freedom is one of the political organizations that had been advocating for conservative causes over the last couple of years. Started by Vice President Mike Pence. I think it was in the last 2 years that he started it, probably shortly after his time in the White House, and I've been impressed with some of the things that they've put out. So I thought I'd share with you this long list of reasons why Joe Biden sucks. And one of the reasons I wanted to make it is so often when we're listening to the conservative media and we listen to these pundits, we don't really hear a full explanation. Sure, he's a Democrat. We'd rather have one of our guys in the White House, but are they just making the case against him because screaming and yelling in the media and calling people names is all they really want to do, which is kind of what it feels like. So I'm going to go through that list with you right now. So on January 20th, Joe Biden issued a series of executive orders, and he rescinded a series of President Trump's executive orders. Many of these are the kinds of liberal, happy-go-lucky things we would expect, one of which was critical race theory. Now, federal employees will have to go through critical race theory training, probably apologize for being white, and have to go through some kind of racial litmus test before they're even allowed to get their jobs in. I think that's a problem, but day one, that was his priority. Of course, he also stopped construction of the border wall, but he very quietly started the construction again and tried to make some kind of bullshit excuse about it. Next, they will now count illegal immigrants for apportionment. As you know, apportionment and how to allocate congressional districts and representation is a big deal in America. He also added gender identity into anti-discrimination laws. These laws were made to protect me from racism. Now, those nice laws are protecting white people. It just feels really racist to me that laws that were made to protect me are now protecting white people, and I don't get it. Next, he rejoined the World Health Organization. As you guys know, the WHO has basically been taken over by the Chinese, who lied to us about the origins of the virus, caused a global pandemic, or hijacking the World Health Organization and trying to make it look like they weren't responsible for it. And of course, since the Democratic Party is well known for taking money from the Chinese, and liberal organizations like BLM also gets money from the Chinese, we can continue to expect the left to kowtow to Chinese interests instead of our own. They abolished the 1776 Commission. This wasn't a big surprise because he who controls the past controls the present, and he who controls the present controls the future. Abolishing the 1776 Commission was useful because they're trying to sell Americans on the idea that American history started when the first slave ships arrived, I think in 1609 or 1619 or something like that. Obviously, American history did not start there because there were people already here. And Western history didn't start there until the settlements, until probably the first successful colony at Jamestown, or was it Plymouth? I'll double check and put it here, but that's when the history of our Western civilization in the New World really started, and they didn't have slaves with them when they came. He shut down the Keystone Pipeline, which was a really big deal. Making sure that America can be energy independent has been vital to our national security. This was something that was advocated for by presidents in the 90s and the early 2000s, and we finally accomplished it. Until we unaccomplished it because, of course, Biden and the Democrats fucked it all up. How did they do this? They got rid of the Keystone Pipeline. They have put limits, this is also something he did when he got in, put limits on the ability for people to drill oil and gas in federal land. Now, there's an argument to be made that the federal government probably shouldn't own that much federal land, but the government has been eating up federal land, and now they're stopping us from drilling. So now we have to go beg the Saudis for more oil, and when they say no, can you blame them? We have all the oil here that we need. They shouldn't have to increase their production because they know we're sitting on a ton of oil. So anyway, it's just another ridiculous Biden. They decided to continue catch and release. And this is a big deal. As I mentioned in another video, there was a young girl here who was beaten and brutally raped by an illegal immigrant who'd already been arrested for a crime, then let go, and he rapes and impregnates a minor, this young girl. Wouldn't have happened if the Democrats actually deported the illegal immigrants who come here. They give special migrant status to people who need to relocate because of climate change. I don't get that, but I guess maybe this will help Eskimos. I don't know. I don't get it. I have to say there was something good that they did, and that was to treat same-sex couples as though they were married for refugee status. As you know, we allow same-sex marriage here because, marry who you want. But a lot of other countries aren't as free as we are, and they don't recognize that. And so I'm glad that I'm glad they're doing it. That's cool. I thought that was cool. Wanted to give the president at least one compliment while I made up this list of 60 or 70 things that make him suck. As you know, they hate Immigration and Naturalization Service because they actually do their job to keep illegals out of our country. Well, they're no longer allowed to issue updates on Twitter. I don't know why they had to make a presidential order about that, but okay. One of the more interesting things they decided to do was to interfere in our elections. It's not good enough to let the Chinese pay them off or to complain about fantasy theories of foreign governments interfering in our elections when you can send federal agents to interfere in them instead. They interfered in Georgia and they interfered in Florida in our elections this week under the guise that they need to make sure that we have free access to elections. I just want to remind you, the viewer, that the elections in Florida and Georgia are actually less strict than the ones in New York. But nobody sends agents to New York, probably because it's a blue state and they know they're going to win it. They have to meddle in the elections in other states to try to get their way. Biden signed the American Rescue Plan that added $2 trillion worth of debt to the national debt. And this was all done before the billions of dollars that started going to Ukraine. They're now allowing unaccompanied minors, any child under the age of 17, entrance into the United States at the border. Even though they've already had about 3,000 children go missing, now they're just going to let more in. Who knows what'll happen to them? It's kind of frightening that these children can't be found. I hope they haven't been kidnapped or sold into slavery, but Democrats don't seem to care about that. Planned Parenthood is now eligible for federal funding again. Yay! Nothing wrong with publicly financing abortions, I guess, if you're a Democrat, despite the fact that Americans are kind of torn on this and tend to agree that maybe abortion should be available, but should the taxpayers pay for it? But to take things a step further, now our international monies can be also used to finance abortions in foreign countries. So not only are you paying for abortions for girls at your local high school, you're also paying for them in all these other countries around the world. The American Families Plan is going to put $200 billion into universal preschool. So it's bad enough that Head Start has already been proven to be a huge failure of a government program. Now they're going to encourage parents to devote even more of their children's time being slaves to the government. But at least government indoctrination can start at 3 instead of children having to wait until 6 or 7. I'm sure that's great if you want to have a Chinese-style government. Biden has tried to get nations of the world to agree to a minimum corporate tax rate. As you know, during the Trump administration, the corporate tax rate went down to 21%. I think the Democrats have already brought it back up to 25%. But in order to prevent America from having to compete by creating a more favorable tax structure for business, they just want everybody to agree to have minimum of 15% so that they can continue to tax and tax and tax, thwarting our growth and hurting our economy. Biden decided to end funding the Abraham Accords. President Trump had managed to help negotiate a situation where Israel would start getting recognized by countries in the Middle East. The details are a bit much to talk about in 30 seconds, but Biden is actively working to sabotage and undo this. They decided to waive sanctions on Iranian oil while levying sanctions on Russia. Iran, a terrorist state and actually a threat. Russia, They tried to force employers to require a vaccine for their employees. So much for my body, my choice. Of all things, they increased the gas tax. Really? Now? Of course they try to increase the gas tax so that we'll all buy electric cars. But if you're in California, as you know, they told you to stop charging them because they didn't have enough electricity. Okay, probably shouldn't laugh about that. You can even select X as gender on your passports. Like, really? X as your gender on a passport? Like, if some guy wants to dress up and pretend to be a woman, that's totally cool. And sometimes they pull it off and they look great. Whatever, I don't care. But at some point, that person's going to be taken to the hospital and they're going to need to know accurately, if they've got their ID, what their gender is. I don't get it. I just don't get it. So advancing American freedom, people have thought that it's just Pence's way to try to run for president or something. I just think he's trying to make a positive contribution to the right-wing movement. He's been a conservative. He's been around for years. He was a congressman. He was a governor. He did his best, I think, as vice president. I hope it's going to be an open field. And after the red wave turned into more like a red splash in the elections this week, I can't help but to think that maybe our messaging and who is carrying that message and how we go about having a conversation with the American people about what it means to be a conservative needs to change. And leading up to this is one of the motivations for creating the channel. Not only did I want to encourage conservatives to run for office, but I also hope that we are able to have conversations here about these organizations like Advancing American Freedom that are fighting for us, because nobody talks about them. Nobody talks about the Institute for Justice, which is going to be in my next video. We have to have these conversations, and people need to know what we're doing and who we're fighting for and what it all means. So I hope you'll go to advancingamericanfreedom.org. I hope that's the website address. If not, I will put it here. And be sure to check out the paper, which I'll put in the description on YouTube. Thanks.